You have no idea how much you cost me, Margaret. 63 years old and still spending like it's someone else's money. My husband set his coffee mug down on the kitchen counter hard enough that a small crack ran along the handle. I looked at that crack for a long time. Then I looked at him. And I smiled. That was a Tuesday morning in October, the kind of gray, heavy morning that settles over Barrie, Ontario, like a wool blanket that won't come off. The maples in the backyard had already turned. I remember thinking how beautiful they looked through the window, and how strange it was that something so lovely could exist in the same moment as what he had just said to me. Let me back up. My name is Margaret. Most people call me Maggie. I am 63 years old. I worked as a registered nurse for 34 years at Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre, the last 11 of those as charge nurse in the surgical recovery unit. I retired 2 years ago with a full pension, my CPP payments, and what I considered a well-earned sense of peace. I also have an RRSP I contributed to religiously every single year since I was 28, though I never once discussed the balance with my husband, Gerald. Gerald is 65. He retired from his construction management job 3 years before me. He has his own pension, his CPP, and a habit of watching the Toronto Maple Leafs every single night of the regular season while I bring him a bowl of chips and a cold Molson from the basement fridge. We have been married for 37 years. We have 2 grown children, our daughter Karen in Calgary and our son Brett in Kingston. We have a house that is paid off, a driveway that needs resurfacing, and apparently, according to Gerald and his friend Doug, a fundamental financial problem. Doug is the one who started all of this. Gerald went fishing up near Muskoka with Doug and a couple of other men from his old crew the weekend before. They sat around a fire, drank Canadian Club, and apparently solved every problem in the world, including mine. Doug's wife had recently gone back to work part-time at a garden center, and Doug, inspired by this development, had decided that couples should operate with full financial transparency and individual accountability. He said he and his wife now split everything right down the middle. He said it was modern. He said it was fair. Gerald came home Sunday night smelling like campfire and bad ideas. By Tuesday morning, he had formed his position. He told me, standing in our kitchen in his housecoat, that he felt the current arrangement was unbalanced, that he had been carrying the household, that ever since I retired, I had been coasting. He used that word specifically. Coasting. As though 34 years of night shifts and 12-hour days and watching people at their most vulnerable had been some kind of leisurely float down a river. He told me my spending was out of control. He said we needed a new system where everyone paid for themselves and contributed equally to the shared expenses. He said it was the modern way. I asked him what specifically he meant by my spending being out of control. He waved his hand in that vague, dismissive way he has and said things like groceries, the household supplies, gifts for people, the things I bought for the grandchildren. He said I was too generous with money that wasn't entirely mine to give. I kept my face very still. I am good at that. 34 years in surgical recovery, you learn to keep your face still when what you are hearing is alarming. All right, I said, let's try it your way. He had absolutely not expected that. He expected tears, or an argument, or at least a firm refusal. Instead, I poured him his second cup of coffee, sat down across from him, and said that I thought the new system sounded perfectly reasonable and that we could start immediately. He looked at me the way a man looks at a door that opened the wrong direction. That evening, after Gerald fell asleep in front of the game, I went into the spare bedroom where I keep my filing cabinet. I am a nurse. I document everything. I have kept receipts and records since before it was fashionable, because when you work in healthcare, you understand that what is not written down did not happen. I pulled out the last 2 years of files, made myself a proper pot of tea, sat at the desk, and opened my laptop. I started a spreadsheet. Groceries first. I buy groceries every week, usually at Loblaws on Dunlop Street. Sometimes no frills when I am being careful with the budget. On average, I spend $480 a month feeding the 2 of us. Gerald eats a great deal of red meat. He likes a specific brand of smoked sausage that costs $12 for a small package, and he goes through 2 of those a week. He likes a particular aged cheddar from the deli counter. He likes his specific brand of coffee that is not the store brand and never will be. I tallied his food preferences separately, just to understand what I was working with. Household supplies. I buy everything: the laundry detergent, the dishwasher pods, the paper towels, the toilet paper. Gerald once, in 37 years, bought toilet paper on his own initiative. He came home with a single pack of the cheap single-ply because it was on sale. I said nothing and quietly restocked the bathroom with the proper kind the next day. I calculated the average monthly household supply cost at roughly $110. Utilities, I pay them. Not because Gerald is unwilling, but because about 4 years ago he forgot to pay the natural gas bill and the heat went off in February. Since then, I pay them, and I pay them on time. Gas, hydro, water, home internet. Combined average, $320 a month. Then I got to the part that made me set down my tea and stare at the wall for a moment. Gerald's family, his brother Wayne and Wayne's wife Paulette, have come for Sunday dinner at least twice a month for the last 20 years. I do not exaggerate when I say that in 20 years, Paulette has never once brought so much as a bottle of wine. I always cook a full meal. A roast, or a chicken, sometimes a lasagna. I make a salad. I make a dessert. I set the table with the good dishes. Wayne is very particular about what he eats, does not like spices, does not like anything unfamiliar, and once pushed his plate away at Christmas because he said the stuffing tasted different. Gerald's sister Linda comes from Sudbury every few months and stays for a week at a time in our guest room. She does not offer to contribute to groceries. She does not offer to help with meals. She leaves her towels on the bathroom floor and once borrowed my good cashmere cardigan without asking and returned it with a small burn mark on the sleeve from her flat iron that she never mentioned or acknowledged. I calculated the cost of feeding Wayne and Paulette twice a month at roughly $130 per visit over 2 years. That came to just over $6,000. Linda's visits cost approximately $250 per week when I factored in the extra groceries, the guest room toiletries I restocked each time, and the cashmere cardigan which had cost me $180 at the Bay and was no longer wearable. Then there were the hockey nights. Gerald has a group of 7 friends who have watched hockey together since before I can remember. They used to go to a bar, but a few years ago they decided our house was more comfortable and better for parking, and also that I made better food than the bar. So they come here. 8 men, every home game of consequence, sometimes twice a week during playoffs. I make food: chili, chicken wings, potato skins, nachos. I buy the beer because Gerald asks me to pick it up when I am already at the store and it is easier for me to just do it. I buy the Doritos in the big bags, the dip, the pretzels. Each hockey night costs me between $80 and $120 in food and drinks. Gerald contributes nothing to this financially because in his mind it is simply happening the way weather simply happens. I sat at that desk until 1 in the morning. The total for 2 years was not something I had expected, even though I was the one doing the arithmetic. $114,000 and change, when I added in everything: groceries and household supplies and utilities and entertaining Gerald's family and friends, and the gifts I had bought for Wayne and Paulette's grandchildren at Christmas because Gerald always forgot until Christmas Eve, and then looked at me with that particular expression. $114,000, and Gerald was standing in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning telling me I was coasting. I saved the spreadsheet, turned off the light, and went to bed. The next morning I made my own breakfast and left Gerald to manage his. He stood in the kitchen in his housecoat looking at the empty stovetop with an expression of genuine bewilderment. I had scrambled myself 2 eggs, made toast, brewed a proper cup of tea, and was eating at the kitchen table reading the paper when he came in. He asked if I was making breakfast. I told him I had already eaten mine, and that under the new system, everyone handled their own. He made toast. He burned it because he always forgets the toaster in this house runs hot. I said nothing. After he left to go to his weekly coffee with Doug, I called our utility company and arranged to have the bills split into 2 accounts at his request. I called our home insurance to clarify what portion of the premium was attributable to his vehicle being on the policy. Then I went to TD and opened a second checking account in my name only, separate from our joint account, and transferred my pension deposits and CPP there going forward. I set up e-transfers for my exact half of the mortgage payments, my exact half of the property tax, my exact half of the internet bill. Exactly half. Not $1 more. When Gerald came home, he asked what was for lunch. I told him I was having leftover soup I had made for myself and that he was welcome to make whatever he liked. He stood at the open refrigerator for a long time. He made a peanut butter sandwich. The following Saturday, Wayne and Paulette arrived at 2 in the afternoon as they always do on the second Saturday of the month. I was sitting in the living room with a book. I heard the knock at the door, heard Gerald let them in, heard the familiar sounds of coats being hung, and Paulette's particular brand of loud cheerfulness filling the front hallway. I came out to say hello. We sat in the living room. Gerald kept glancing toward the kitchen. After about 20 minutes, Paulette said, and I could hear the cautious testing in her voice. Something smells good, does it? Nothing smells good, I said pleasantly, because I haven't started cooking yet. There was a pause. Gerald cleared his throat. Maggie, he said, aren't you making dinner? I looked at him directly. Are you having people for dinner? He opened his mouth and closed it. Wayne looked at Gerald. Paulette looked at the carpet. I explained, in the most composed and cordial voice I could produce, that Gerald and I had recently decided to separate our finances and our individual responsibilities. That I no longer managed the household entertaining budget, and that if Gerald was hosting guests for dinner, he would of course be covering the cost and the preparation. Gerald went red in a very specific way that I recognized as the color of a man who has created a situation he has no idea how to escape. Paulette looked at Gerald. Wayne looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at me. Then Wayne, who I have never particularly liked but who surprised me entirely in that moment, leaned back in his chair and said, Gerald, what exactly did you say to her? And Gerald, who cannot lie convincingly even on his best days, said it was a financial planning thing, a mutual decision. Wayne said, with the particular patience of a man who has known his brother for 65 years, that it did not look like a mutual decision from where he was sitting. Gerald suggested they order pizza. Paulette said she was going to use the washroom and was gone for quite a long time. Wayne sat with me in the living room and said, quietly, while Gerald was on the phone with the pizza place, "What did he say to you?" I told him. Wayne was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "In that flat, matter-of-fact way men from their generation speak when they are genuinely embarrassed, that's not right, Maggie." I said I knew. He said Gerald had always had a blind spot about what women actually do. Said their mother used to say the same thing. Said he was not proud of his own record on this, but that he had at least learned to see it. I thanked him. He said, "I hope you're not letting him get away with it." I told him that was entirely up to Gerald. The pizza arrived. It was fine. The evening was strained in the way that evenings are when a truth has been spoken and everyone is working around the edges of it. After they left, Gerald washed the pizza boxes flat and put them in the recycling without being asked. I noticed this. I did not say anything. That night he came to the living room where I was watching a program I wanted to watch on the television for once. He sat down. He did not ask to change the channel. After a while he said, "Maggie, I think I might have miscalculated some things." I waited. He said he had been talking to Doug, and Doug's idea sounded reasonable in theory, but that maybe it did not account for all the details of a specific situation. I said nothing. He said he did not actually know what it cost to run the house each month. I said I did. He asked me what the number was. I told him to come to the spare bedroom. I opened the laptop and showed him the spreadsheet. I walked him through every line. The groceries. His share of the groceries, itemized by preference. The smoked sausage. The aged cheddar. The $12 coffee. The household supplies. The utilities I had been paying because he let the gas lapse in February of 2020 when the temperature went down to -22. The hockey nights. The cost per night. The average frequency. The annual total. His brother and Paulette's visits. The math on 20 years of twice-monthly Sunday dinners. His sister Linda. The cashmere cardigan. He sat very still. When I had finished, he said quietly, $114,000. "That is just the last 2 years," I said. He rubbed his face with both hands the way he does when he is genuinely distressed rather than performing distress, and I know the difference after 37 years. He said, "I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't." He said, "I thought I was the one carrying things because I was paying the mortgage." I reminded him, gently, that the mortgage was paid off, and that even when it was not, my income had contributed to its payment for every one of the 22 years we had carried it. He looked at the spreadsheet for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "I shouldn't have said what I said." "No," I agreed. "You shouldn't have." He said he was sorry. I told him that I appreciated that, and that I believed he meant it. And I did believe he meant it. Gerald is not a cruel man. He is a man who did not look, which is different from cruelty but causes some of the same damage. We sat with that for a while. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" I thought about that question. I had been thinking about it, in some version, for 2 years since I retired. Since the days started stretching out and I noticed all the things I was still doing that I had done while working, all the invisible management of a household that had never been acknowledged because it had never been absent. I told him I needed him to see it. He said he saw it now. I said, "Permanently." Not for a week, not because he was embarrassed. Permanently. He nodded slowly. Then I told him there were specific things I was not going to go back to doing. I was not going to plan and cook and clean up every Sunday dinner for Wayne and Paulette. If he wanted to have his brother over, he was welcome to. He could order in. He could cook. He could ask them to bring something. What he could not do was assume that because I had always done it, I would always do it. He agreed. I told him Linda's next visit needed to be discussed in advance, that it was not acceptable for her to simply announce she was coming and expect to be housed and fed and waited on. If she visited, she was a guest in both our home and my retirement, and I expected her to behave accordingly. He agreed. I told him the hockey nights were going to change. His friends were welcome to come, but I was not catering them. He could pick up the food himself, or they could chip in, or they could go back to the bar. I did not mind which. He said he would figure it out. I said I was going to keep my separate account, not because I did not trust him, but because having money that was entirely mine, that I had earned, that I could spend without anyone calling it coasting, mattered to me. He said he understood. We did not hug. It was not that kind of evening. But we sat together in the spare bedroom with the laptop between us, and something shifted. Not dramatically, not like a movie moment, more like a window that had been painted shut finally giving way, just slightly, just enough for air to come through. The weeks that followed were different. Not perfect. Gerald burnt the first dinner he made for Wayne and Paulette, a chicken that was fine on the outside and not entirely done in the middle. Wayne ate it without comment, which told me his brother had spoken to him. Paulette brought a bottle of wine. It was not expensive wine, but it was something. I sat at the table and let them sort out what was happening around me, and it felt like the first Sunday dinner in 20 years, where I did not spend the afternoon on my feet. Gerald learned to use the e-transfer function properly and began paying his half of the hydro and gas bills on time. He also started going to the grocery store, which produced some genuinely interesting results. He came home once with 3 different types of mustard because he could not remember which one I usually bought and decided to cover all the possibilities. He came home another time without toilet paper, which he said he forgot, and we had a brief but clarifying conversation about the relationship between forgetting things and the assumption that someone else will handle it. He did not forget again. He figured out the hockey nights himself. He told the boys they were doing a potluck now. Each man brings something. It took exactly 1 planning email, and everyone agreed immediately and without complaint, which told me that they had all simply assumed someone else was managing it for 30 years. And the moment someone made a different arrangement, they adapted without any difficulty at all. I found that both funny and instructive. 4 months after that Tuesday morning in the kitchen, with the cracked coffee mug, I was sitting at my kitchen table on a quiet afternoon in February when my daughter Karen called from Calgary. We talked every week, but this call had a different energy. She said, "Mom, what's going on with you and Dad? Something seems different." I told her the short version. She was quiet for a moment and then she laughed, not cruelly, but with the particular laugh of someone who recognizes a truth they have been living around for a long time. She said, "I always wondered how you did all of it. I wondered all through growing up how you did everything. I thought it was just what mothers did. I thought it was just what you did. I didn't understand that it was a choice, that somebody chose not to see it." I said, "Your father sees it now." She said, "Do you believe him?" I thought about the 3 types of mustard. I thought about the potluck hockey nights. I thought about the Sunday dinner where Gerald cleaned the entire kitchen after, including wiping down the stovetop without being asked. and then came and sat beside me on the couch and did not even turn on the game because he could see I was reading and wanted quiet. I said, "Yes, I believe he is trying. Whether trying is enough, I'm still deciding." She said, "Fair enough, Mom." It is now 7 months since that October morning. The maple in the backyard has come back. The new leaves are very green against the gray sky we still get in May here. I will tell you what has changed. I sleep better than I have in years, which is not something I expected. I thought the tension of those first weeks would linger, but instead something settled. I think it was the spreadsheet. Not the numbers themselves, but the act of making them visible. 37 years of managing a household without acknowledgement sits in a person's body in a way that is hard to name until you name it. And once I named it, something in my back and shoulders let go. I walk 3 mornings a week with my neighbor Dorothy, who is 68 and recently widowed, and who tells me I am lucky to have a husband who is still alive and learning things. I tell her she makes a fair point. She makes me laugh in the particular way that women who have been around the block understand each other. I started a watercolor class on Thursday afternoons at the community center. I am not especially talented. Gerald looked at my first painting, a bowl of fruit that leaned heavily to one side, and said it was very colorful. I appreciated the effort. I took the cashmere cardigan to a specialty cleaner, who managed to improve the burn mark significantly, though it will never be fully right again. I bought myself a new one in a deep burgundy at Hudson's Bay. I did not ask anyone's opinion before I bought it. Linda called in March to say she was thinking of coming to visit in the summer for a week. Gerald told her she was welcome, but that she needed to let us know the exact dates so we could plan. He also told her, gently but clearly, that he and I had made some changes to how we operated as a household and that we were looking forward to having her but as a proper guest rather than, and he paused here for a word, rather than just assuming things would sort themselves out. Linda was quiet for a moment and then said that sounded fine. I do not know if it will be fine, but the conversation happened. Wayne and Paulette have been coming on the last Sunday of each month rather than twice. Wayne called Gerald and suggested this himself. He said once a month felt more respectful of people's time. He also, last visit, stayed after Paulette went to the car and said to me quietly, "You're looking well, Maggie. Better than you have in a while." I thanked him. He is not a complicated man, Wayne, but he is, when called upon, capable of seeing things. I respect that. Gerald and I celebrated our 37th anniversary in April. He made a reservation at a restaurant in town. A proper restaurant, not the Swiss chalet. He ordered a bottle of wine I had mentioned once, months earlier, that I had always wanted to try. He had written it down. He had written it in the notes on his phone. The name of the wine I had said in passing, and he remembered. I do not know exactly when he became a man who writes things down, but he has become one. We are not the same couple we were before October. That is not a sad thing. The couple we were before October had a very specific arrangement that only one of us fully understood and that only one of us was paying in full. The couple we are now has had an honest look at the books, as it were, and made some adjustments. I will not tell you it was simple or without difficulty. There were evenings that were cold and uncomfortable. There were mornings where Gerald said something imprecise and I had to decide whether to let it pass or address it, and sometimes I addressed it and sometimes I did not. And I have learned that choosing your moments is not the same as letting things slide. There is a great deal of difference between silence that protects peace and silence that enables a pattern. I know the difference now in a way I did not always know it before. My daughter Karen came to visit last month with her 2 children, my grandchildren, who are 7 and 9, and loud in the most wonderful way. Gerald took them to the park for 2 hours so I could have a quiet cup of tea with Karen. She said, sitting across the table from me, "You seem like yourself again, Mom. I didn't realize you'd stopped seeming like yourself until you started again." I said that was a very astute observation for a 34-year-old. She said, "I had a good example." Gerald came back from the park with 2 exhausted children and grass stains on his own pants from apparently joining a game of tag he had not been prepared for. He made hot chocolate for everyone and did not spill it and remembered that my grandson does not like marshmallows without being told. I sat at my kitchen table with my grandchildren and my daughter and my husband, and the maple in the backyard was coming into full green, and I thought about the Tuesday morning in October and the cracked coffee mug and the word coasting. I thought about the spreadsheet, all those numbers arranged in rows, All those years of grocery runs and Sunday dinners and cashmere cardigans and hockey nights, visible at last. I thought about Dorothy's 3 mornings a week and watercolor Thursdays, and the burgundy cardigan hanging in my closet, and the wine Gerald had written down in his phone. I am 63 years old. I have 34 years of nursing behind me, and, if I am lucky, 3 decades of living still ahead. I do not intend to spend them invisible. I work too hard and too long, and track too many receipts to be invisible at this point. If you are watching this, and you recognize something in what I have told you, I want you to know that it is never too late to open the spreadsheet. Not for revenge, not to punish anyone, but simply to see what has always been true. The numbers do not lie. They are just numbers. But sometimes making them visible is the most important thing you can do. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, I would love to know you were here. Leave me a comment and tell me where you are watching from today. I always read every one. And if you are not yet subscribed, come and stay a while. I share a new story every week, and I am very glad to have the company.